My name is Elex. I am 50 years old and I never thought I would live to tell the story of how the person I loved most in this world, my only daughter, betrayed me in a way that cut deeper than any knife ever could. And though my voice trembles, with pain I must tell it, because perhaps someone out there will learn from the shadows I walked through. For most of my life I worked tirelessly, waking before the sun rose and returning home when the stars had already taken over the sky. Not because I wanted riches or luxury, but because I wanted to give my daughter, Anna, a life where she never had to feel the poverty and struggles I grew up in. Her mother passed away when she was just 8 years old, and from that moment I became both father and mother, protector and nurturer, giving her every ounce of my love and shielding her from the cruelty of the world. And in those years it felt as though we were inseparable, like two lonely souls clinging to each other against the storms of life. I would cook for her, help her with schoolwork, braid her hair before she went to school, and sit outside her room when she had nightmares just to let her know she was not alone. And for years she would run to me whenever she was hurt or scared, calling me her hero, her safe place. And in those moments I believed my sacrifices were worth it. I saved money slowly, not just for daily living but for her future, putting every spare coin into a savings account with her name tied to mine, believing one day it would pay for her education, her wedding, her dreams. I didn't know then that the same savings would become the weapon she used to destroy me. When she turned 19, Anna began to change, not all at once but little by little, in ways that at first seemed like ordinary growing pains. A teenage rebellion, staying out late, answering me with impatience, demanding more freedom. But then the changes grew darker. She started hiding her phone from me, whispering in the night, sneaking out, lying about where she was going, and when I asked she would explode in anger, accusing me of not trusting her, of suffocating her. And it hurt, because all I wanted was to keep her safe. Then came the day she introduced me to a man named Ryan, her boyfriend, and from the first glance at him my heart sank. He was older than her, rough around the edges, his eyes cold and calculating, the kind of man whose smile never reached his eyes, and every instinct in me screamed that he was trouble. He didn't shake my hand firmly, didn't look me in the eye, and when he left the room I felt as though he carried a shadow with him. I tried to warn Anna, but she would only laugh, saying I was paranoid, saying Ryan loved her, saying he understood her in ways I never could. Slowly I saw my daughter slipping away from me, her once bright laughter turning into mocking tones, her gentle eyes narrowing with resentment, and every time I tried to pull her back, Ryan was there whispering poison into her ears. I worked harder than ever, not knowing that behind my back, the two of them were planning something unthinkable, and the life I had built for us, every drop of sweat I had shed, every coin I had saved, was about to vanish in one cruel night that would leave me shattered and broken, staring at the ruins of the trust I had once held sacred. The storm came without warning, though perhaps deep down I had seen the clouds gathering long before, because one night when I returned home late after a long shift, my body aching but my mind warmed by the thought that my daughter would be asleep safe in her bed, I opened the door to silence, a silence that felt wrong, too heavy, and when I walked into her room the bed was empty, the closet half bare, the drawers ransacked as if she had left in a hurry, and my heart started pounding like a drum of dread. And before I could even process the sight, I rushed to my study where I kept the documents of my life, my savings passbook, the little box where I stored her mother's jewelry. And in one sickening instant, my knees nearly gave out because everything was gone, every single item. And when I opened my laptop and checked my account, the numbers that had once given me hope, the savings I had scraped together through decades of labor, the very foundation of my trust in the future, had all been drained to the last coin. I stared at the screen in disbelief, praying it was a mistake, refreshing again and again, but reality carved into me like a blade. And in that moment I knew Anna had not only left me, she had taken with her the very life I had built. And the thought that she did this willingly alongside that criminal, Ryan, tore something inside me that could never be mended. Hours passed as I sat there, unable to breathe, the night thick with betrayal. The house that once felt full of memories now felt like an empty shell, and every photograph of her smile mocked me, every echo of her laughter rang like a cruel joke. I remembered her tiny hands holding mine when she was a child, her innocent voice calling me Daddy, her promises that she would never leave me. And I asked myself how those same hands could now steal from me, how that same voice could lie to me, and how the little girl I raised with every ounce of love had turned into a stranger who saw me not as a father, but as an obstacle. I didn't sleep that night, nor the nights that followed, because with every hour that passed I replayed the image of her running into Ryan's arms, laughing at how easily they had destroyed me, and though my soul was drenched in sorrow, beneath it all, in the deepest part of me, something else began to awaken, something sharp and cold, because betrayal of this magnitude does not fade with time. It plants a seed, and that seed grows into something that only one word can describe: revenge. The days that followed felt like walking through a graveyard of my own life, because everywhere I turned, I saw reminders of Anna, and yet none of them gave me comfort anymore. They only cut deeper: the empty chair at the table where she once sat, the quiet hallways where her laughter used to echo, the untouched closet where her childhood clothes remained as silent witnesses of the love I had poured into raising her. I tried to convince myself that maybe she had been forced, that maybe Ryan had manipulated her into this betrayal, but the evidence was too clear. Her handwriting on the forged signatures that emptied my bank, the messages she had left behind, on social media where she flaunted her new life with him, not a trace of guilt or shame, only arrogance and pride, as though she had conquered me, as though I was nothing more than a stepping stone she had crushed beneath her feet. I became a ghost in my own home, wandering aimlessly from room to room, and the neighbors who once waved with kindness now avoided my eyes, whispering rumors of how my daughter had humiliated me, and that humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal itself, because I had lost not just my savings but my dignity, my very identity as a father. At night I would sit by the window staring into the darkness, and in that darkness I found myself talking to her mother, telling her how sorry I was, how I had failed to protect the only thing she left me, and the silence that answered me was like a cold hand tightening around my throat. But grief has a strange way of changing its shape, and slowly, as the weight of despair threatened to crush me completely, it hardened into something unbreakable. I stopped crying. I stopped begging the heavens for answers. Instead, I began to think. I began to plan. Ryan thought he was untouchable, with his charm and his lies, hiding behind the reckless bravado of youth. But I had lived 60 years in a world that had taught me patience, and patience, I knew, was a weapon sharper than any blade. Each night I replayed the betrayal in my mind not as a wound, but as fuel, and every detail became part of a larger picture, a path that would lead me not only to confront them, but to make them feel every ounce of pain they had inflicted on me. Revenge was no longer an idea. It became my reason to breathe, the fire that pulled me out of bed in the morning, the whisper that guided me through each hour of the day. They had taken my money, my trust, my pride, but I still had something they could never steal. I had time, I had knowledge, and I had a father's will sharpened by heartbreak. And I promised myself that when the moment came, Anna and Ryan would understand what it meant to destroy a man who had nothing left to lose. I began my search quietly, without letting anyone know, because revenge is not born in noise but in silence, and silence was now my greatest companion. I learned that Anna and Ryan had fled to a nearby city, not too far but far enough to believe. They had escaped me, and it was there they had begun living extravagantly on the money they stole from me, posting pictures of fancy dinners, new clothes, and a rented apartment that looked like something out of a glossy magazine. And each image cut into me like a knife, yet also gave me clues, a map of their arrogance. I went to the city not as a father desperate for his daughter, but as a hunter, blending into the crowd, watching from a distance, following their routines, and what I saw broke whatever tenderness still lingered in my heart. Anna's laughter, as she clung to Ryan's arm, her joy at his lies, her pride in the very man who had stolen everything from me, and I wondered if she even remembered the nights I had stayed up sick with worry when she was a child, or the times I skipped meals, so she could have enough to eat. But perhaps memory was something she had buried along with her conscience. I knew I could not confront them recklessly, because anger would only destroy me, and so I waited, observed, and gathered every detail like a spider weaving a web. Ryan had enemies, small-time gangs he had crossed, debts he hadn't paid, and a reckless temper that made him dangerous but also predictable. Anna, though, was softer, still too naive to understand the kind of world she had entered, and that was my only solace, because I knew when the trap closed, she would finally see Ryan for what he was, and maybe then she would realize the depth of her mistake. I started leaving traces, subtle ones, anonymous messages to Ryan's enemies about his whereabouts, whispers in places he frequented that stirred suspicion, and slowly the noose began to tighten around him, not from my hands directly, but from the world he had poisoned with his arrogance, and as I watched from the shadows, I felt the first stirrings of satisfaction, not joy, because there is no joy in revenge, only the cold balance of justice being restored. Yet still the hardest part was seeing Anna's face, still blind with devotion, unaware that the man she trusted was digging both their graves with his greed, and I asked myself if I was prepared to watch her fall with him, if I could truly let the last piece of my heart be consumed by fire, and though the answer tore me apart, I knew what had to be done, because betrayal demands a price, and sometimes the price is everything you once loved. The night of reckoning finally came when Ryan, drunk with arrogance and money that was never his, swaggered into one of the very clubs owned by the people he had betrayed, and I was there in the shadows, waiting, my heart a storm of rage and sorrow but steady with purpose. I had fed enough whispers, laid enough trails, and all I had to do now was watch as the trap closed. They surrounded him, men who had waited for their chance, men who despised him for debts unpaid, for promises broken, and Anna was with him, terrified, clutching his arm, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. For a moment my heart wavered, because she was still my daughter, but then I remembered the empty bank account, the sleepless nights, the way she had laughed while my life's work crumbled, and I let the pain harden into steel. They dragged Ryan into the alley, and I stepped from the shadows, my face no longer hidden, and when Anna saw me, she gasped, whispering, "Father," as if the word itself carried shame. I did not look at her but at Ryan, beaten and trembling, and for the first time he seemed small, insignificant, a parasite stripped of his false charm. I walked up slowly, every step echoing the weight of betrayal, and I told him, "You stole my money, my daughter, and my peace, but tonight I take it all back." My voice was calm, yet it carried the thunder of years of sacrifice he had mocked. With a nod, I gave the men permission, and they finished what I had set in motion. Ryan's arrogance ended there, swallowed by the very darkness he had thought he controlled. Anna fell to her knees, sobbing, begging me to forgive her, to save her, but I only told her that forgiveness was no longer mine to give, that she had chosen her path when she turned her back on her blood. I left her there, broken, with the ashes of her choices, and as I walked away into the night, I felt no joy, no triumph, only the cold, heavy satisfaction of justice delivered. Revenge had not healed me, but it had given me something I could live with, a reminder that betrayal carries a cost, and Elex, the man they thought could be destroyed, had written the final chapter with his own hands.